Welcome back to part 4 of this daily crypto deep dive. Let's pick up where we left off. Nothing in this story really mattered until something actually survived. Ideas are cheap. Experiments are endless. History is full of brilliant concepts that worked on paper, impressed small groups of experts, and then quietly collapsed the moment they touched the real world. Digital money was no different. By the time Bitcoin appeared, nearly every piece of the puzzle already existed. Proof of work, cryptographic scarcity, peer-to-peer networks, distributed ledgers. What didn't exist was a system that could hold together under pressure. Everything before it had failed not because the ideas were wrong, but because the execution was fragile. Bitcoin changed that. And it didn't do it by shouting. It didn't arrive with a company, a marketing plan, or a promise to replace the world. It arrived as code, released quietly into a broken financial system at the exact moment trust in institutions was collapsing in real time. Banks were failing. Governments were rewriting the rules on the fly. Ordinary people were watching the foundations of modern finance reveal just how dependent they were on emergency intervention. For the first time, the question, what if money itself is the problem, no longer sounded extreme. It sounded reasonable. That timing wasn't a coincidence, but timing alone wouldn't have been enough. What truly separated Bitcoin from everything that came before, it was not a single technical breakthrough, but a series of deliberate design choices that removed every known point of failure from earlier digital money systems. No company to regulate, no vault to seize, no executive to pressure, no founder to defer to, and crucially, no requirement for trust in anything other than the rules themselves. This episode is about that execution, about why Bitcoin's launch looked almost invisible at the time, and why that invisibility turned out to be its greatest strength. Because the systems that survive aren't the ones that announce themselves loudly. They're the ones that grow quietly until it's too late to stop them. The world in 2008 was not the world DigiCash had faced in the 1990s, nor the world e-gold had collided with in the early 2000s. This time, trust in financial institutions had collapsed in real time, in public, and on a global scale. Banks were failing. Governments were intervening. Bailouts were announced almost weekly. Ordinary people were watching institutions that had always been presented as stable reveal themselves to be fragile, opaque, and dependent on emergency support. For the first time, the idea that money itself might be broken didn't sound radical. It sounded reasonable. That context matters, because Bitcoin did not launch as a company, a product, or a movement asking for attention. It launched as a protocol, quietly, almost timidly. And it did so without asking permission from anyone. The white paper didn't promise riches. It didn't talk about overthrowing governments. It didn't market itself as an investment. It simply described a peer-to-peer electronic cash system and laid out with almost clinical calm how the long-standing problems of digital money could finally be solved. No press release, no venture funding, no launch event, no roadmap, just code, released into the wild. And that was the first decisive difference. Bitcoin did not have a company behind it. There was no DigiCash to license it, no e-gold vault to seize, no executive team to subpoena. There wasn't even a legal entity to point at. From the moment it launched, Bitcoin existed everywhere and nowhere at once. That wasn't accidental. Every failed digital money system before Bitcoin had left behind a clear lesson. If you give the world a handle, someone will grab it. If you give the system a center, pressure will concentrate there. Bitcoin was designed to deny the existence of that center from day one. Even its creator was deliberately absent. Satoshi Nakamoto didn't go on podcasts, didn't attend conferences, didn't give interviews, didn't file patents, didn't try to monetize the project. And then, just as importantly, didn't stick around forever. Over time, Satoshi faded into the background and eventually disappeared entirely, leaving no authority figure behind. That absence wasn't a flaw, it was a structural feature. Because authority invites dependency, and dependency creates fragility. Bitcoin also launched with no pre-mine, no insider allocation, no early investor carve-outs. The first coins were mined in public, using the same rules that would apply to everyone else. Early participants weren't buying into a product. They were contributing to a network that rewarded them only if they supported it. That incentive alignment was critical. Previous systems had relied on trust. Trust in banks, trust in vaults, trust in companies. Bitcoin replaced trust with cost. If you wanted to attack the system, you had to outspend it. If you wanted to cheat, it would cost you more than playing by the rules. That wasn't just cryptography. It was game theory. Bitcoin assumed selfish behavior, not cooperation. It didn't rely on goodwill or ideology. It relied on incentives that made honesty the most profitable option for participants, even if they didn't care about the system at all. This is where all the previous ideas finally locked together. Proof of work, which Hashcash had introduced as a way to fight spam, became the mechanism that secured the ledger. Distributed consensus, which B-Money had imagined but never fully solved, emerged from competition between miners extending the longest chain. Time-stamped chaining, which BitGold had proposed, created a history that became increasingly expensive to rewrite. None of these components were new in isolation, but their combination was unprecedented, and crucially, Bitcoin launched with no expectation of success. Early users didn't think they were participating in the birth of a global monetary network. They thought they were experimenting with an interesting piece of code. Coins were worth nothing. Mining was done on laptops. Transactions were sent as tests, jokes, proofs that the system worked. That humility mattered. Because systems that don't promise the world are allowed to grow quietly. They don't attract regulators. They don't threaten incumbents. They don't trigger defensive responses. Bitcoin spent its earliest years below the threshold of significance, and that gave it time to harden. While previous digital money systems had been forced to scale quickly or die, Bitcoin was allowed to evolve slowly, in public, under real-world conditions. And then something subtle happened. People started to realize that Bitcoin didn't just work. It kept working. It survived software bugs. It survived exchange failures. It survived internal arguments and external criticism. It survived being ignored, mocked, misunderstood, and written off repeatedly. Each survival reinforced the same conclusion. There was no switch to flip. As adoption grew, pressure grew with it. But unlike DigiCash or eGold, pressure had nowhere to land. There was no vault to raid, no operator to arrest, no server to seize. Bitcoin didn't resist authority by confrontation. It avoided it entirely. That was the final evolutionary leap. Bitcoin didn't ask to replace the financial system. It simply existed alongside it, indifferent to approval. And because it didn't depend on any institution, institution-level failures didn't threaten it. In fact, they strengthened its narrative. This is why launch design matters so much. Had Bitcoin launched as a company, it would have been regulated. Had it launched with venture backing, it would have been captured. Had it launched with a visible founder, it would have been pressured. Had it launched with aggressive marketing, it would have attracted attention before it was ready. Instead, it launched as infrastructure. Boring, neutral, hard to categorize, and that made it resilient. Bitcoin also avoided anchoring itself to anything external. No gold, no fiat peg, no promise of stability. It didn't try to import trust from the physical world. It generated trust internally, through rules that anyone could verify and no one could change unilaterally. That choice was critical. Every previous system that tied digital value to physical custody had inherited the weaknesses of custody. Bitcoin severed that link entirely. Value existed purely as information, secured by energy and mathematics, not vaults and guards. This is where Bitcoin stopped being just a digital money experiment and became something else entirely. It wasn't just money. It wasn't just software. It was a system that could survive hostile environments. And survival is the ultimate filter. Over time, Bitcoin attracted people who didn't care about ideology at all. They cared about reliability, about censorship resistance, about the ability to hold and transfer value without asking permission. For them, Bitcoin wasn't a revolution. It was a tool. And tools don't need believers. They need users. This is why Bitcoin's early years look quiet in hindsight. There were no viral moments, no mass adoption events, just steady, incremental growth. Each block added to the chain reinforced the same truth. The system was still there. By the time regulators noticed Bitcoin, it was already too late to stop it. The network was global. The software was open. The ledger was distributed. There was no company to shut down and no jurisdiction to target. That would make a meaningful difference. And that brings us to the final part of this story. Because understanding why Bitcoin survived is only half the picture. The other half is what that survival means for money, for power, and for the systems we still take for granted today. In the final episode of this series, we'll bring everything together. We'll look at why Bitcoin's resilience changed how money is understood, why its lack of a center still matters more than its price, and what lessons its origin story holds for every digital system that comes after it. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit follow if you're new, and join us for the final chapter. We will see you at the top.